right, we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about empowering a connected workforce in Industry 4.0. I see we have a lot of people already here. Arthur, Calderon, Anna, Gregory, and a few more. Thanks so much for joining. Martin, welcome. Welcome to the webinar. Stroud, Bettinati, Manoj, Kranenbroek. Welcome to a webinar. We're really excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about some great stuff, some really relevant topics for manufacturers in Industry 4.0. And we also have a really great panel discussion that's going to happen. We have a CEO from SmarterChains, the CEO from SwipeGuide, as well as our keynote speaker, Alex Barber, just talking about really great ways to empower connectivity in the manufacturing industry. So, you know, it's something that we often forget in manufacturing is the human aspect of it. We focus more on more and more tools, machine efficiency, controlling each and every aspect of our supply chains. But often we see that we forget some of the most important parts of manufacturing, which is the workers and the people involved on a daily basis. So today we're going to talk about some really awesome strategies to kind of build those people up, give them the tools they need to succeed, and find ourselves succeeding in manufacturing because of this. So in just a couple minutes, we'll get things started. This is actually my first experience in Microsoft Teams. I don't know if it is for you. There's a chat function. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, please feel free to use that chat function to ask any questions that you might have. We will have 10 minutes at the end of the session where we'll try and get to all those questions. And we're also going to open it up to y'all, for you to ask what's on your mind. If you still have any questions after the webinar is over and we don't get to you, please leave your emails in the chats. You know, make sure we know that you'd like us to get in touch with you with a question. We'll go ahead and pull those emails and get in touch with you. Hey, David, welcome. I see your emoji, smiling face. It's great to have you here. Speaking of, we will have your mics and cameras turned off during the webinar, but if you need anything, if you have any connectivity issues or something, please drop us a line and we will go ahead and try to get that solved for you. We're really excited to do this. This is the first webinar with SmarterChains and SwipeGuide. We have the CEOs from both of these companies here. I'm also a storyteller with SwipeGuide. And then, like I said earlier, if you're joining now, we also have our keynote speaker, Alex Barber. And we're going to pull everybody into a panel discussion for the majority of the webinar, where we're going to kind of touch on some of these hot button issues with empowering a connected workforce in Industry 4.0. If you're wondering, what am I going to take away from this webinar? Well, we're going to talk about things like getting a data-driven methodology for Industry 4.0 transformation at scale. We're going to discuss some of the behaviors and strategies that leaders need to master and inspire for a successful digital transformation. That's behaviors in themselves and also behaviors that they need to instill in their frontline workforce. We're going to talk about skill sets and solutions to optimize workflows and accelerate productivity. And we'll also share some of the lessons that we've learned, you know, sometimes some hard-learned lessons, sometimes some really awesome, wonderful insights from years in the working with the manufacturing industry that we've learned digitizing processes and also just kind of working on the ground in workforce empowerment. Yes, David. We're excited too. It's going to be a really great webinar. I'm going to let everybody keep filling in for about another minute, and then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Vasilis, who is the CEO and co-founder of SmarterChains, and he's going to talk for a few minutes about workforce empowerment and share some insights with you, and then we're going to open it up for the panel discussion. So just give us 1 minute more. And like I said, if you have any thoughts to share, if you have any questions, if you have any issues with the Microsoft Teams experience, drop us a line in the chat. And once again, we'll go ahead and do our best to either answer those questions or get your problem solved. And yeah, if you don't get what you need answered, just reach out and we'll get in touch with you and we'll answer you one-on-one after the webinar. So without further ado, I think it's just about time to hand it over to Vasily. Vasily, if you want to come out and give your presentation, we'd love to take a listen.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Vasilis. Thank you so much, Chris, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining. We are very thrilled to have you together today. Before we start with the panel discussion, which we are going to have a very interesting exchange of views with regards to how do you empower a connected workforce around Industry 4 in an ever-changing landscape that we're all experiencing. Before we do that, I would like to ground us all into a framework that will help us understand exactly what are the different dimensions of Industry 4 that enable a connected workforce. So we are going to be sharing an enterprise framework, which is the main pillar of work that we do in SmarterChains, of how do we enable, through a structured way, the full journey around the different dimensions of Industry 4, and of course, utilizing a specific compass that is touching all the different elements that we need to do. So, as the discussion today is about empowerment, we need to really discuss how important it is to have specific frameworks in order for leaders to help us in the ever-changing world of Industry 4, of being able to really equalize or harmonize, if you like, the internal adoption rates of different things with the external pace of changes. The full Industry 4 environment, if you like, has two core elements. First of all, it has the journey pillar, which is all things taking your organization from knowing nothing or having specific islands of expertise, if you like, around the organization, into the journey of the different phases of the transformation around Industry 4, starting with education of your different stakeholders, engagement and the preparation of the teams by understanding where you stand, how you benchmark, what is the actual value potential of Industry 4, then being able to define what from the universe of solutions helps you to really drive value, as well as being able to integrate more and more technology into your ever-expanding technology stack, and then, of course, being able to really execute, always following the value. Now, the journey is one thing, but to be able to go into the journey, having all those different operational areas within our operations, having all these different personas around our operations is very important. Give me 1 second, please. I understand that you don't see my presentation.
All right, we see it now, Vasily.
There you go. See it now? All right.
Yes. Looks great.
Good, I didn't move so much. I'm so much forward. So talking about the journey, as I described, is all things going from having no specific educational plan for the organization to fully engaging everybody around one common language of understanding around Industry 4, to preparing the organization for the transformation by understanding where we are, defining the roadmaps, and then, of course, being able to execute, always following the value and scaling the learnings. To do that, we need to have a specific abstract framework that is being based on the different operational pillars of our operations to really connect the impact of digital technologies into the future. Now, in SmarterChains, we have developed the roadmap, which we call the 10 Industry 4 dimensions, which is acting as this compass in order to connect all the different operational areas within the factory, as well as all the different personas. Today, we are going to be talking about two of the most important dimensions. One dimension that is completely dedicated to humans, which is all things around Factory of the Future leadership, and one dimension which is completely dedicated to empowering through technology our both blue collars but also white collars on the shop floor to really do their job better, faster, cheaper, the Tech-Augmented Workforce. Now, Factory of the Future leadership is all the different behaviors and strategies that really inspire and support and provide guidance, if you like, to the organization to really drive and accelerate the digital transformation journey. Now, as we know very well, for effective execution, all leaders need to master various different elements, from being visionary and inspiring to being able to put in a strategy, but also being able to draft a very agile way that they can approach transformation. For the tech-augmented workforce, is all around the different technologies that can help our people to do their day-to-day tasks better by augmenting their skill set and optimizing their workflows. Today, we are going to talk about the combination of those two with the rest of the panelists. So thank you so much for attending here today, and I really hope that you find our discussion forward interesting. Handing it back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Very cool. Thanks so much for that, Vasily. It looks great. Cool. Well, I think that it's time to start our panel discussion. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. I'm going to invite them to turn their cameras on as we get ready to dive into our panel discussion. So as Vasily mentioned, we're going to be talking about two main frameworks when it comes to empowering this connected workforce. We're going to be talking first about Factory of the Future Leadership, and then we're going to get into the Tech-Augmented Workforce. Now, before each of these different sections, what we're going to do is actually ask for a little bit of audience participation. You don't have mics, but what I'll do is give you guys a prompt, and then if you want to go ahead and type any of your experiences, anything meaningful that you get from these questions into the chat function, we'd love to hear what you have to say, and maybe we can touch on those a bit in our Q&A sessions. So joining us for our roundtable discussion, you just heard from him. This is Vasilis Karamalegos. He's the CEO and co-founder of SmarterChains. Welcome to the panel discussion. Next is Willemijn Schneyder. She is the CEO and proud founder of SwipeGuide. Her focus is empowering frontline excellence in manufacturing with a radically human focus. Just was nominated for the Inspiring 50 in Deep Tech and really makes it part of her mission to elevate people on the shop floor. And likewise, we also have as our keynote speaker, Alex Barber. She's the founder of Frontline Sidekicks, which is an organization that focuses on frontline upskilling, leadership development, and also change management in a manufacturing setting. She has years of experience working on the shop floor with people, and we're really excited to get kind of her perspective and her insight as we go through these topics today. So I want to pose a question to the audience real quick, and if you have anything relevant, please type it into the chat box while we're having this panel discussion. And the first question is really simple. It's, have you ever had a bad manager? And that's something that I'd like you to think about while we're having these talks. Maybe you'll be inspired by something. So if you have anything to offer on that question, have you ever had a bad manager, feel free to drop it into the chat. So we're going to be talking about Factory of the Future Leadership. So we're all driven by curiosity about innovation and change. We know that manufacturing leaders will often engage and experiment with new Industry 4.0 technologies without a common enterprise-wide vision focusing on kind of the strategic and agile elements that it might need to be successful. So in order to guarantee successful digital transformation, leaders need to adopt behaviors and strategies that inspire and support to the whole enterprise, and that means lifting people up. So I want to put out a general question to the three of you first. How would you define a good leader? What makes a good leader? And it can be manufacturing or otherwise. Who wants to take that one first?
I can start. So yeah, hi also from my side. Yeah, what makes a good leader, and I think, yeah, I would say in general, to me is first of all, a good listener. I think leaders need to really listen to their people and also act upon what they have heard. Communicator, very good communicator who explains the why, can inspire, knows the direction, the vision of where one is going. And what I also find very important is one that takes responsibility for the team, but also for their own action, that can admit mistake and can create a culture of learning and positive failure culture, that it isn't about a culture of blame. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. Just building up on that, I think great leaders constantly able to connect the dots across the organization and lifting up what works and what doesn't. But I also think that tapping into what you said, radical honesty, right? You listen with intent, you communicate with empathy, but also address. Like I think we had a session called Uncomfortable Conversations, and I think that's also an element of a good leader.
Yeah, and I would agree with Willemijn. We had it when I was in Prague, we were calling it critical conversations, that you were really talking the truth. So you have a very clear baseline of things. I would definitely agree with your positions, and I would also add a few stuff on the human side of the authenticity, and it is a Greek word thing, and I cannot spell it out. So authenticity is a very important one for a good leader, and also being humble, as well as being able to express humanity and empathy, or if you like, fragility, something that from a leadership point of view, it's not very easy to do. So we have not learned how to do that. Now, if we would put the perspective from an Industry 4 point of view, definitely making agile and data-driven decisions is very important in order to be a role model on how to use technology to drive that. And then, of course, we have two new pillars that are very important as well from a leadership point of view, which is social responsibility or sustainability, if you like, as well as diversity as well, which is something that we need always to be considering this as we are building our organizations and we're empowering our people forward. Another element I would like to think as well is how do we also create the leadership skills as well, because a lot of those things are not things that are, they're not coming with us. We are learning them, right? So it's very important as well to have a structured way that we classify the different skills as leaders in order then to be able to really structurally approach them from a learning experience point of view, as well as preparing the next generations of leaders in our organizations as well, right? Which is very important. And I think that the clusterization of the skills is around cognitive skills that we have, technical skills, strategic skills, which is, I would say, the top tier skills that we like, from envisioning, engaging, empowering our teams. And then, of course, interpersonal skills, how we negotiate, how do we persuade, how do we influence the situations to inspire our teams forward.
Very well said. Yeah, no, I think those are all great elements. And, and I've been working for a while, and you can definitely tell when a leader has those qualities and when it doesn't. It makes a serious impact on the workplace. Alex, I'd like to field a question to you. So it's been said that employee engagement starts with engaged leadership. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? Why is it so important to have engaged and motivated teams? What's at the core of that engagement?
Yeah, sure. So maybe respective to like having engaged leadership, like if we talk about frontline managers, supervisors, team leaders, like all types of managers in the manufacturing industry, they're the ones that make or break a team culture. They actually lead, many of them lead like 20 to 40 people in total, about like 80% of the total organization. So more than the half of the people are led by frontline managers, and they make up even a big chunk of general management, also more than 50%. So we're talking about managers who often have been neglected, that have never received any form of leadership training. Like Vasilis was also saying, those are things that need to be taught. And they don't know the basic of leading people. They now have to also deal with all sorts of like daily operations. They're stressed. They default to authoritarian management styles because that's just the easiest to do. And in that process, they're the ones stressing and not valuing their employees. So that actually happens a lot. So it's very demotivating for 80% then all of a sudden of the of a company to be just running around, not having any vision, not having any direction. And now all of a sudden you have to have a digital transformation process going on and some change management. It's just pure chaos if management isn't really engaged, if management doesn't really know where it's going, if they're not empowered. How is the whole rest of the organization supposed to work towards a common goal, which now is to transform the business and to implement Industry 4.0?
Yeah, absolutely. I see Stroud put in the comments, not a bad manager, but not a good people person. And I think that maybe goes deeper than we might think. You know, it's those are essential qualities.
Yeah, and I think to build up on what you said, Alex, is talking about why is it so important. I think one of the things that is currently happening is different generations coming together in these teams. Like what you're explaining, current leaders, most of them not having learned how to be leaders, but now they also have to bridge the gap towards new generations that expect different things in their work environment. So if you look at a lot of the newer generations, it's about full transparency always. It's about, I would say, respect that has to go both ways. Why should I listen to you if you never listen to me? And maybe it comes down to what you've said before. It's lead by example, or treat people how you want to be treated. But I think tackling and understanding, so tackling that generation gap and understanding what inspires, your teammates to hop on board of your, I would say, your team vision. That requires a new skill set, I think.
Yeah.
Vasily, I have a question for you. What do you see as the key risks for organizations that don't embark on this Industry 4.0 journey now? You know, what happens? What are the risks if they wait to not jump on these Industry 4.0 trends?
That's a good question. So what I used to say to clients most of the time, that Industry 4 is doing it, not talking about it. And what this means is that at the end of the day, Industry 4 is all about experiential learning. And this is because we have so many new things that we need to learn, so many new skills that we need to develop, so many things that we need to integrate, that we need to start doing it. There is no way that if we talk about it, we are going to solve it. It's all about really putting our hands dirty, learning how to do it, and then being able to systemize it, simplify it, standardize it, and then scale it across in order to really drive the value. As a lot of the new technologies is all about scaling them to really find the business case at this point of the game, at least, before we have the unit cost that will come later on to create much more attractive business cases. Now, if I would structure your question, Chris, I would say that from an organizational point of view, it's very important to experience, because you will understand what this means for the culture, what it means for the values that you need to drive, the value that you need to maybe redefine what you have as priorities on the software, what is important, what is not important, what is the different mindset qualities we need to have in place, what are the leadership behaviors, how leadership structures and rewards and incentives is going to change because of the technology we are going to put on the software, and what this means. Then from a business point of view, technology will help us to see the operations and the losses of the operations from a much different viewpoint than we had until now. Both digital and automation technologies, but also the different organizational stuff we need to put in place in order to enable those digital and automation solutions. And then, of course, from a business point of view, is how do we scale the value as well? So how do we understand that we can take something that we are implementing in one line, in one factory, and being able to scale it fast across many plants, many processes, many different manufacturing technologies as well. Lastly is the work processes. At the end of the day, technology is going to completely define the way that we do stuff. So the better and the earlier we understand it, much better it is, not only from a software point of view, but also how this interacts with supply chain, with operational excellence, with planning, with vendor collaboration, with our OEMs collaboration. So at the end of the day, the risk that there is not learning enough, and then you come late to the party, if you like. Of course, we do have clients many times that they believe that they are late because they don't want to be the early adopters, they want to be a bit of a laggard. So they don't want to do the mistakes that others have done, and they want to capitalize on the mistakes, which, yeah, it makes sense if you see it from a structural, not making mistakes point of view. But if you talk about cultural enhancement, this takes time. So the earlier you get in the game, the more willing and able your organization is going to be to drive what we call a bottom-up type of innovation adoption curve on different industrial technologies.
Fantastic. So I think we have, does either of the other panelists want to respond to that? I think we have time for a response and then maybe another question or two in this section. So does anyone want to add to that really good rundown of those risks by Vasilis?
Well, to hop on there, I think there's only one point I want to amplify. I think looking across the organizations that we work for, looking across organizations that are in different types of digital transformation, the biggest learning that I always see the most is your speed of learning. So what Vasilis is saying, the biggest risk is we're not learning, we're not implementing what we've learned in our next iteration. I just wanted to highlight that because in every, I would say, transformation we've been part of, that technology can facilitate, but it cannot ignite the core of change.
Yeah, Willemijn, that's a fantastic point. And let me add into this a bit more that at the end of the day, Industry 4 is not an isolated effort. It's not a one plant effort. It's an enterprise effort. And it must be seen like that, which this is even more difficult to talk about scaling or enterprise learning at scale. It's even harder, because it has many different components. It has the components of how do you really drive it? How do you engage executive sponsorship? How do you embed Industry 4 into the enterprise structure? How do you embed in clearly the dependencies and priorities across the majorities of plants? How do you drive an enterprise architecture? Things that we were never learned to do, we now have to do at scale with many different technologies as well, that they all talk to each other. So the speed of learning, it's very important, but also it's the speed of failing as well, because, as entrepreneurs, we understand failure very well. But, coming from a corporate environment as well, we are not rewarded to fail, at all, actually. In manufacturing, we have our 99.9% KPIs, of course, it's even tougher to do so. So this really requires a big cultural shift to enable failure as part of the learning process, but always puts in contrast, the short-term gains with the long-term gains, as we know very well. Unfortunately, machines runs now, and we need to deliver product tomorrow. So we are a bit sometimes victimized by the short-termistic, if you like, approach of the operational reality.
Yep.
Definitely. And I think that's actually a great segue into my next question. And that's for you, Willemijn, is in addition to celebrating failure or, learning how to capitalize on failure in a productive way, what are some specific strategies and also behaviors in leadership that can help inspire and accelerate this digital transformation? So what are behaviors in leadership that help build up in a digital transformation? How does that work?
Well, you're asking the person that says start with your frontline workers first, so it's not going to be a surprise that I'm going to say I fundamentally believe that the biggest issue that we're facing is for years and years we've deprived a very expert and knowledgeable workforce of their technology to showcase and share and improve that. So for me, it always begins with recognizing what you have and the value that it brings for your organization. I think great leaders that ignite and excite digital transformation, they have a unique capability of recognizing expertise where it is, unlocking that talent, and acknowledging how that adds value to your business problems and how that adds value to solving your business problems. In essence, I would say accelerating digital transformation and making sure that you do it sustainably starts with creating a culture first, creating the right atmosphere. Yes, you have to share a common goal. Vasilis has just explained it. You have to start with a business-led strategy, right? It has to solve real problems with real added value. But then it's culture first. It's about creating trust, enabling self-directedness, creating a culture of always be learning in which people can put their expertise and are sort of invited to put their expertise to work. You have to get that why right, absolutely. If you then look at leadership, what we've seen work really well is organizations that have a huge dot somewhere down on the road, but they start small, practical, and understand that you have to start in a place in your organization where the impact is high to boost morale, to build digital capabilities in your teams, and to have a sort of effortlessly leading into that organizational change. I think when all of the things that Vasilis mentioned before, learn fast, fail fast, and improve quickly. These are all core elements that a leader should bring, whether you're, a frontline, like a shift leader or a plant manager or a CI manager. It is about creating that culture, connecting these dots, and really transitioning the way that you work, but also come with a clear mandate. Where it fails is where higher level leadership in an organization is not fully bought into the vision and into what it takes to turn around an organization. And I think one of the questions that was in the chat as well, just tying into that, do KPIs need to change? Yes, in two ways. I think there need to be more human-centered KPIs, but there also need to be KPIs on progress on that digital transformation. And I think great leadership brings those people on board and understand, as I said before, leading into this, is technologies can help facilitate a change, but the change has to come from the organization itself, the culture.
Well said. And time really does fly when you're having fun. It's actually time for us to move on to our next section. So we've talked a little bit about the tech. We've talked about leadership in the factory of the future. You know, in this high-tech factory, industry 4.0, what are some of the kind of the roles, responsibilities, and strategies that leadership use to inspire? Well, there's another part of that. Someone actually asked a question about follower development, about, development of the frontline workforce. Well, next we're going to talk a little bit about the tools and the tech tools that kind of counterbalance this leadership portion, and that's how to augment and elevate this workforce with tech. It's a dimension in these new technologies that assist employees in their tasks. They might augment their skill set, they might optimize existing workflows, but they always provide access to information and expertise and open new horizons for productivity. Maybe it's efficiency, it's innovation, and very often it's also democratizing the way of working and value creation on the shop floor. So we're going to dive in, and Alex, we're going to hear a bit more from you in this section as well. I have a few questions for you. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and ask another question for the chat function, and that is, how many digital tools are you currently using in your tech stack? Do you know? Is it none? Is it 1 to 5, 6 to 10, more than 11? So we'd love to hear how many digital tools are currently involved in your tech stack. Share what you're interested in sharing, but we'd kind of love to gauge, where are you in that, kind of tech development curve. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with a question for you, Alex. How does empowerment impact the bottom line of the company? Is there a competitive advantage to having an empowered workforce?
Yeah, sure. I mean, empowerment, we keep using this word. It's a big word, right? So what does that even mean, and how can you translate that into financial value or performance for a company? So you can talk about what we're here saying about empowering through technologies. You can talk about empowering through leadership, through culture, through training and development. So there are so many pillars to empowering your workforce, and all of which have a positive impact on the bottom line of the company. And it can be, like you also said, like through productivity, like when the processes improve through digital, like to tech-augmented solutions. It can be also because empowering the frontline workforce means that they'll come up with better ideas that no one knew before. Like we were just saying, it was for a long time, these experts have been neglected and not listened to. And if now they feel empowered to raise their voice, to say when things don't work, to for the company to better understand the pain points and frustrations that lead them to very slow working processes or very manual working processes that could be improved, it is mainly productivity that will be improved. At the same time, for me, I also equivalent empowerment as a pillar of engagement, right? So if you feel empowered, you're also more engaged. And just that in itself, you have statistics that say, I think there's one from the Hay Group saying that if you feel engaged, you're 43% more productive. So there again, it affects the bottom line. And then regarding innovations, I think that's for me also like a very, very big part. So I think you can now maybe through ideas produce products that maybe you weren't able to produce before. You can sell more, you can have better quality. I think there's so many aspects to it. It's just sometimes very difficult to put it into numbers and percentages and all of that. It makes it very intangible, although it has such a great effect on all aspects of the bottom line. And that's why I also think it's definitely a competitive advantage, because you have the experts on board that you didn't have on board before, and those that acknowledge and that understand how important their frontline workforce are, they will actually be the first ones to go through the Industry 4.0 transformation successfully.
So incredibly impactful and yet kind of hard to put a number on. I think we can all relate to that. Vasilis or Willemijn, do you have anything to add to that point on empowerment in the bottom line?
Yeah. Please, Willemijn, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I think building up on what Alex said, yes, we see it's more difficult to point out, but what I appreciate is definitely post-pandemic, we see the numbers coming in on what it did to productivity and what it did to product quality as larger groups of workers resigned. They call it in America, I believe, the Great Resignation or the Big Quit. And actually what an additional effect of empowerment is job retention, right? It is the transfer of critical operational knowledge inside an organization that it brings, and the retention of your team, engagement, and making sure that there's more meaningful and motivation at work. So I think that is, indeed, we see it across our clients as well. It's more difficult to point out, but it's becoming more clear and clear as they struggle to keep lines up and running following the Big Quit, as it's called.
And to add to that, we at SmarterChains, we have actually, the framework is connecting exactly what Alex and Willemijn said. We are connecting exactly the different work tasks that are happening on the shop floor to the value, to the maturity of the different technologies. Because like this, you know exactly what you're adopting, how it is impacting, and then of course around, if you know that the bottom line at the end of the day, you can really drive then everything that you need from an HR point of view in order to drive then the culture, the behaviors, and then of course the actions that can help you go into the next steps better and better, always following a data-driven model, because you can really measure it, you can really then empower people, because clarity brings power, and people, they need to know what is the targets. Like this, they can strive for the better on the shop floor, and you can scale the value up across the different functions and across the different units or plants, if you like.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely. Alex, another question for you. You've spent a lot of your career actually working on the shop floor, and we're wondering if you have any experiences or success stories of companies implementing this culture of empowerment and collaboration. Kind of from the other side of things, what does that look like when it's happening on the shop floor?
Yeah, so actually, that's a little tricky question because like having like a full culture of empowerment, there's always like some things that aren't like perfect, to say like this. There's no perfect culture of empowerment. It's also different with each company, right? But if I can give an example, when I was working at Beiersdorf, and this is also one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, I had the opportunity as a manager to lead a new team, a new production line. It was a small team of 4 people, and we managed within a year to ramp up a new production line. It was exactly during the Corona crisis, without having any like support. Everything was done remotely, and when the employees were first like transferred to me, to say it like this, they actually started very demotivated because they were told that they need to go to that production line or there is no other job for them. So they really didn't want to go. They were super demotivated. It's not the ideal situation to be in. But what we did is we involved them throughout the whole process. We took them to the suppliers. We showed them everything. They were able to like make adjustments to the machines the way that they thought was necessary. We had like a proper training plan from beginning to end. Before even everything was started, they created all of their standard operating procedures themselves. So they were like the owners of this machine or this new line. And at the end of a year, I couldn't say as much that I noticed the difference, but I had a colleague of mine that went on maternity leave exactly that year. So she came back a year later and she was really like, what did you do with them? All of a sudden, they went from, oh, I don't want to do anything, not smiling, like to, okay, so we can do this. And then I have another idea. And then maybe we can transform it like that. And they were just like flourishing with ideas, and they were so motivated, and they were helping each other. They were collaborating, and it was really insane to see, because after a year in the midst of COVID, we had surpassed all of the expectations. And I was even able to give them more time to practice and train and fail on the line to see how it can run better. And it was really like a 1-year transformation that, was very well known also within the company, just because of the culture that I was able to create of empowerment within my small limits of the team, right? So yeah, that's how it can look like, to say.
That's fantastic to hear. Sometimes when I do customer stories or interact with clients at SwipeGuide, you get to hear some of the success stories. And I have to say that hearing the feedback and hearing positive feedback about how technology is empowering the workforce, or how people are really using it and actually enjoying it, not to sound corny, but it warms your heart. It's really cool to see, positive responses and see that you're making an impact in someone's daily working life. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Willemijn and Vasilis, I have a question for each of you. And then actually, I'm looking at this chat bar, and we have had a fantastic amount of audience participation. I'm absolutely tickled to see that. And so I want to make sure that we leave enough room at the end of this webinar to try to get to some of these big, meaty questions that we have from the audience. So Willemijn, I'll go ahead and pitch you a question. Based on your experience, what is the typical roadmap for starting with implementing digital tools in manufacturing? If you have a manufacturer who doesn't quite know where to start, how does that process work? What does that look like?
Well, I think Vasilis already tapped a lot into like a larger roadmap, enterprise transformation. But looking at, I would say, if you run a factory and you want to get started, let's just look at that use case. What is really important, a couple of the things that we mentioned before, right? Have a clear business-led strategy. Understand where are the pockets of opportunity for improvement that technology can, I would say, accelerate. Then what we've seen working the most is understanding what is the best use case to get started with, and setting that, I would say, organize a a change team. I don't want to make it sound heavy, but what we see organizations struggle with is giving this a priority, implementing the digital tools, making the time for it. There's always something happening that takes priority. So look at the people that are great ambassadors of technology in your organization, and look at the people that are great ambassadors of real use cases that have a high impact, and lift these people up into a separate team, and then start small. And as I said before, make sure it is also here put in the chat, right? Digital tools can be perceived as controlling. Well, you should do the opposite. So if you want a digital transformation and digital toolings to work at scale, the involvement and buy-in from everyone working with the technology from day one is your best friend. And that's also where at SwipeGuide, when we look at rolling out digital tools across our client base, those are the ones that accelerate the highest and have a that's where the energy comes loose as a flywheel. So as a roadmap, that is important, making sure that initial team gets up and running fast and constantly have these short feedback loops and then share and scale what works. So one example that we see a lot happening is that as soon as multiple teams across different sites understand they can reuse what's being invented in a different location, that they can eliminate 50 different ways of doing the same thing, that is when the eyes get sparkling. And I think every technology should be an advocate for that, but it can only happen with the full involvement of your frontline teams from day one. And the obvious elements that we've mentioned before is data is your best friend down the line, next to, I would say, the adoption from the frontline workers.
Very well said. Thank you. So for our final question, I'd like to transition into the technology itself. I'm a marketing writer for manufacturing solutions. So, a lot of times I have my ear to the ground about what's new and exciting in manufacturing tech. And we hear these amazing things and these amazing opportunities for things like AR, VR, augmentation in the frontline workforce. But Vasili, your own benchmarking study actually indicated that the tech-augmented workforce is one of the most neglected dimensions of all of the 10 dimensions that you covered in your presentation. And we were curious why, for early adopters and people trying to break into this augmented tech workforce, why is it so difficult for them? Why are there roadblocks to implementing this kind of tech for early stage companies?
So you mentioned the factor of the future benchmarking study. So there is something very important here, that the study, we did it before COVID. And, in manufacturing, and at least in industry 4, like the COVID before COVID is like Christ before Christ type of thing, So before COVID, it was a very different story to pitch to any client about industry 4 and about they were perceiving this. Because as Willemijn said very well, different priorities, it was not something that people were believing in, too many technologies, too many different skills. Manufacturing, we want stability, and we are mainly focused on, eliminating losses that we know, blah, 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 blah. So there is a lot of different situations back then with now. Nonetheless, the fundamentals are still the same. The companies that they manage to take advantage of technology and technologies at scale, they have 2 or 3 common characteristics. First of all, they have an enterprise-wide industry 4 strategy. So bottom line, they know exactly where they are going, not only on the big picture, but also how do they segment this big picture around the different business units and around the different manufacturing technologies. Number 2, they have an integrated master plan, meaning digital, automation, OPEX is all under one and is all driven by value, which is very clearly laid out to all the different layers and stakeholders of the organization. Number 3, they all cultivate the right leadership behaviors. That's paramount importance because you can do so much with a top-down mandate. The whole thing is to really being able to enable a bottom-up type of innovation, right? Now, this is as far as the benchmarking study and what it told us back then, having this big sample of plans that we did the analysis. But the reality is that what separates client, early stage companies with more advanced companies is all things that we talked before. I would say as well, loss elimination thinking, being very much focused completely on how do you drive value from the adoption of technology. If you cannot find the case, you don't do it, regardless how sexy it is, regardless if you had pilots across the plants, regardless if you had pilots across the plants, you can find the application stories, but still, the value in the business case is not 100% laid out, so you can drive ownership behind this. And then, of course, the cultural elements of previous failures of tech implementations, which I would say it is a very big factor that is holding and stalling implementations, especially big MES, big ERPs, that they haven't gone well. And of course, in manufacturing, we want continuity of people on the shop floor to maintain, of course, very high-priced assets. But at the same time, these people have been being failed technology implementations. They can be actually also a roadblock to anything that comes that is new and will help us really scale value moving forward.
Wonderful. And do Willemijn, Alex, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to our Q&A section?
No, I'm excited to get to the Q&A section.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, let's do
Cool.
so.
Well, thank you very much to the three of you, Vasily, Willemijn, Alex. Thank you so much for providing those insights and that knowledge and answering my questions. So now I'd like to turn it around and let's address some of the questions that came in from the audience. And first off, I'd love to pitch one to the three of you. We talked about incentives. This one's from Jessica Horn, and this is a question to the whole panel. How can managers be incentivized to put their people in the center? Do KPIs need to change, for example, implementing more human-centric KPIs and have compensation depending on these rather than on turnover or something of the sort? So how do you feel about structuring these incentives? Are they necessary? How would you structure them? It's a big question.
Shall I go first? First of all, I would like to say that HR is coming to the party in many clients. So, and of course, Industry 4 being extremely highly technical and far more cross-disciplinary engineering as well than the typical manufacturing OpEx type of thinking that we had and the skills that we had, starts from there. So HR, from the moment that we have proved cases, we have proved technologies, we have proved the need for different skill sets and different mindsets, they're coming to the game. And I do think that the approach is going to be the same. Now, that being said, I mean, the same with what we knew from the OpEx type of times, that of course we are combining and connecting schemes of reward and incentivization to the different results. Those may be at the line level, at the department level, at the plant level, at the region level. Of course, we're doing the segmentation. Now, that being said, we are still trying to find a way around how to really be able to measure stuff. Okay, so how do we really measure productivity? We have a lot of clients and very big clients as well that they have gone from 20 to 250 plants. It's like in a 2 years time frame. That of course they have the typical issue. How do we track value? Because if we are not able to track value, how are we then being able to really and honestly and transparently and in a way that is enabling trust, connect this to the actual performances of the people in the lines, right? So this becomes quite a bit of an issue, actually, but I do think that it is just in this phase of the game that we see it as an issue, but it is just another problem to be solved. Now, if the incentives are going to be with the financial value, if they are going to be with the different KPIs, how we are going to be able to separate the KPIs that are coming from different OpEx initiatives or from different adoptions of digital automation technologies, this is still to be seen. Many organizations, they really struggle how to integrate OpEx with digital and automation tools. We do see that this is going to be something that at the end of the day, the personas are the same, is going to be fully integrated as well. And I think that the HR incentivization systems are going to be following this, including, of course, specific KPIs that we're going to be seeing.
Definitely. Willemijn, Alex, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I can maybe like a small thing just from a client of mine. It was maybe not directly the big Industry 4.0 transformation, but it was about how to properly digital upskill the whole workforce on the baseline without any like big project yet happening. So it's kind of like the educate part that you were saying, and they, in order to do that, decided to add KPIs like training days, then also like certain, because they also had like certain scores on little exams that were gamifications, etc. So they were trying on like a training level to add KPIs and to say, okay, you as a manager, you have to provide a certain amount of training days to employees. And the thing is, training is the first thing that gets out the window when there's stress. So if at the end of the year you didn't provide those days, you didn't manage to enable that, then this doesn't look good on you as a manager. So this could also be like a small example of how KPIs could change.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Alex. To take the word right out of my mouth, we see a lot of organizations that are moving away from traditional training, but really looking at, I would say, smaller, as you said, smaller skills collection. And we actually have a huge manufacturing company, more than 100 plants, that is literally transitioning into collecting badges to completely rethink how people learn. And they've locked their KPIs into indeed skill participation and continuous skill development of the entire team. So I think great example.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that. So I think we have time for one more question. And Alex, this one's directed to you, but I think that we have all kind of seen and experienced this in our lines of work. Do you see a difference between young and old team members? For example, that older workers are more or less reluctant to share their knowledge?
Yeah, I think it depends. I'm not sure if it's related to like sharing knowledge. I think that I have the experience that it's rather a little bit of a character thing. I don't know how to say this, but like if people are reluctant to share their knowledge, it's often because they're afraid of being replaced. So it's like, I don't want to share this knowledge because if I share that with everyone, that means that they can do my job and then maybe I get fired. So that's the experience that I've had, but I've had that actually with the older generation workers as well as with the younger ones. It was just about like where, like, especially the younger ones that have just started, they were more afraid of being replaced because they were like the youngsters, whereas the older ones are like, I've been in the company for 25, 30 years, they're not going to fire me now. So it can, I didn't feel like it was a big generational difference, at least from my experience. I had more of a generational difference when it came to be about change, right? And about learning new things. And the younger generation, when it comes to digitalizing processes, they're like, I can't believe we haven't done this until yet. Like, finally, we're doing something. Whereas the older ones are more like, okay, now I need to learn this. Like, I haven't learned something in such a long time. So they're more concerned, not about then losing their jobs, but about what happens if I can't learn it? What is the support that I'm getting? And that's, I think, the bigger difference that I've seen with the generations. And then obviously you have the ones that are just about to retire and they're like, well, I don't have to learn this anymore. But that I understand as well. I mean, 2 years before retirement, that's also a different story.
Definitely. So with the fear that we're going to get someone making a great point and then not be able to finish what they're saying, I think it's about time to wrap up this webinar. So while I still have you here within the hour, first of all, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to you, our audience. Thank you so much for your awesome participation. To be honest, some of the best audience participation I've seen in my webinar career. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. It really makes these a much more impactful experience. We really loved having you here. I'd also love to extend a huge thank you to our expert panelists, Vasilis, Willemijn, and Alex. Thanks so much for offering your expert opinions and helping make this a really wonderful experience. If we didn't get to your question, we're going to touch base and make sure that we can find out a way to get in touch with you and go ahead and answer your question, follow up one-on-one. Make sure to follow us both on LinkedIn. That's SmarterChains and SwipeGuide. We'll be posting, well, of course, we'll be posting new and wonderful things about Industry 4.0 and new events and speakers like this. And also make sure to go and check out Alex Barber's organization, Frontline Sidekicks, on LinkedIn as well, where you'll find more of her great OpEx expertise. And stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more great content coming your way. And once again, thanks so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. All right, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
thanks,
Thank
Vasilis.
you. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Alex.
Chris. Thank you, Willemijn. Thank you, Alex. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.